Alrighty, so today we have on Mr. Curt Sumner. He's a teacher at Carroll County High School. Mr. Sumner, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing good, and me and Ethan know you personally at school.
Yeah.
But I can speak for both me and Ethan. We're very excited to have you on. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope I can give you something worth putting out anyway.
Absolutely.
All right.
So we like to start off our interviews basically the same way. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Hillsville. I've lived in Carroll County the majority of my life, except for I moved to Harrisonburg when I was in, about 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Went to work for Architectural Metals Company up there. Mm-hmm. And then I lived in Blacksburg for 3, 4, 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then started dating a girl and lived in Hillsville and wound up back in Hillsville. And been here ever since.
Yeah. Did you go to high school at Curt County High
I
School?
did. I graduated from Carroll County High School, went to Whitfield Community College, and went to work. Worked in the architecture and engineering field for years and years. Yeah. Then somehow wound up teaching.
Mm-hmm. So you went to Carroll County High School?
Yes, sir.
Where you now work. Was there any educators while you were at the school that affected you personally?
Drafting teacher I had, Charles Ray. He was a pretty interesting guy. Mm-hmm. At the time he taught drafting, mm-hmm. which we thought that's what he did, but we didn't know that he was endorsed to teach all various other subjects, biology and all these things, and we just thought that was amazing because we just thought he's a drafting teacher. What would he know about that? Yeah. But he was a good inspiration for you because he took time to teach you how to do this, and I mean he was pretty meticulous about this stuff, and he let us do some pretty cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Were you very academic in high school?
Absolutely not. I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I didn't care anything about being there. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be done with it. And then I went to Whitfield. Started out in the civil engineering program at Whitfield. Mm-hmm. And after a year decided that this is not for me. I'm tired of school. I'm tired of going to school. And I took my last psychology exam in the spring of '85 and went directly to a furniture factory in Galax, Virginia. I got a job, but I worked there during the summer that year thinking that, hey, I'm done with school. So I went to work, but I've always been an observer. I've liked to try to watch people and see how things work and how people interact. Mm-hmm. And I saw people that had been there for 25 years. And I started thinking, is this really what I want to do? Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with it, because there were people that had been there for that long that were making a good living, and they raised their kids, they paid for their houses. Yeah. But I didn't think that was something I wanted to do. Yeah. So I went back to Whitfield and wound up going through their drafting mechanical technology program after that, which was would now be a computer-aided design mechanical technology class.
And was that an associate's degree program? Or?
Yeah, they do 2-year programs over there. Yes, sir. And then I went to work, like I said, for an architectural metals company, and started there in '87. And I worked there, and then moved to Blacksburg. Went to work for an architect in Blacksburg, and then moved on to an architectural and engineering firm in Blacksburg, and then went to Mount Airy and worked for Pike Electric for several years in their engineering department, and then moved to J.G. Corum, general contractor, did a lot of design build things there, wound up as a project manager for them.
Okay. What made you choose drafting when you went back?
Something I was pretty good at. I already knew how to do a lot of it. Yeah. Back then everything was by hand, so you had a skill to it. It was a little bit of an art form at that point. Yeah. That was something I was pretty good at, and I liked it. And I like to see things take shape from how everything came together. Especially like the architectural end of it too.
Were you like that as a child as well?
I think so. My mom always talked about that I was always drawing something or sketching something. I can remember sitting in class, while I wasn't interested in what they were talking about, and drawing things. And my dad too. He's a surveyor, and he had worked for years in the surveying industry. He went to work for the highway department straight out of high school and as on a survey crew. And then he went through working in Blacksburg, Northern Virginia. And so I'd always been interested in it. He told me about one time he designed a house for a guidance counselor at the high school that had a creek running through the bottom. So I guess it was just in the gene pool, I suppose.
Yeah.
So you were exposed to surveying at a young age?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever consider going to that field?
I did. But you know how it goes when you're a teenager. Do you really want to do what your dad does?
Yeah.
So I was around it a lot, and I worked for him. I helped him in the summers. I got to cut a lot of brush when I was young. But I did learn how things work.
Yeah.
Learned the measurement end of it, learned how to set up instruments, and a little bit different than what they do now.
Are there some similarities between it and drafting?
Oh yeah, definitely, and in the engineering part of it, because you have to. It's all about solving a problem, and property surveys like it's a boundary, and you're trying to find where pieces of the puzzle are. And I always thought that was pretty interesting. I worked for the town of Pulaski's engineering department for a couple of years, and it was a lot of civil engineering type things. So we did a lot of that type of work.
It hit more in your childhood too. I've heard you talk a lot about athletics.
Yes, sir.
Which athletics did you play?
I played football in high school. I didn't know I liked basketball as much till I got out of high school, but I played football. Growing up, played baseball in Little League and just various sports. We didn't have rec league basketball or anything at that point. We just had baseball and football at the time. So that's what I played because that's just what everybody did. And I liked it. I mean, I never was a great player. I probably could have been better if I'd worked at it a little bit more, but all of us could be. But yeah, it was just always fun. And my dad played. Yeah. He played at Hillsville, so I was always exposed to sports growing up. And he played, 3 sports at the time.
So who was the coach at that time?
At the coach when my dad was there, or when I was at Carroll County?
Yes, sir.
Up till my senior year, majority of the time it was John Hinkle. And I just saw where he'd recently died. And then Bill Worrell, that coached baseball, he coached football our senior year. Great guy, and I can still hear him. If you did something that he knew better, or he knew you could do better, I could still hear him asking us about that.
Was it the Tommy Thompson Field at the time?
Tommy Thompson Field at the time, probably. Tommy Thompson was coach when my dad played at Hillsville. My dad always likes to talk about playing with Frank Beamer. So that was Hillsville's claim to fame for a long time. But yeah, I guess it was Tommy Thompson Field. I can't remember. It was different then.
Of course.
The seeing pictures of the old scoreboard are pretty funny now because it's now what we've got now versus what they had when we were there. It's kind of funny.
I've always heard that was a drive-in movie theater.
It did used to be a drive-in theater. My dad, he talks about it a lot because, like I said, he grew up there, and he actually grew up just a stone's throw from there. Yeah. So he likes to tell some funny stories about the theater, but that's for his podcast.
Yeah. Were there any non-CTE instructors that had an impact on you? So maybe the math or the Englishes, or the sciences?
The funny thing is I like to pick on her a lot at work. Miss Goad, Yvonne Goad.
Yes, we both have her now.
I had Miss Goad when she first got out of college in the 8th grade. She was my 8th grade math teacher. She doesn't like me to tell that story. She says, "Curt, don't tell them how old I am." But nah, she was a good teacher. I always thought she knew her business.
She's very smart. She's very smart. I think she knows math more than.
And she was a good teacher. Then you had teachers that you really didn't learn that much academically from, but you learned a lot from them life skill wise.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that happens to you a whole lot. That might be the reason that you or a student keeps coming back to school. You never know how it goes. Yeah. We had some characters when I went to Carroll County High School.
We've heard a lot of your stories. you're pretty, I guess, no nonsense teacher at the high school.
Well,
You have fun, but I don't think people want to act up.
well, and we got to do our business.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Because there's enough foolishness that goes on everywhere else.
Absolutely.
And we need to learn how to act, because my job as a CTE teacher is to teach workplace readiness skills. And if we act that way out in the real world, what's going to happen? We're not going to have a job very long, right?
No.
And I try to just, especially when the younger kids, because they're coming out where ninth graders are just getting into where they're getting to choose their own classes.
Yeah.
You remember how it was.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they don't really know what to do yet.
Yeah.
And it's their first taste of freedom, kind of, I feel like. And we just have to talk to them about, hey, that's not how we act here. We can't act like that in here, because we got too much stuff in here. People could get hurt or tear up some expensive equipment. So, yeah. And I just want them to know that, hey, I'll take care of you as much as I can, but here's what I expect out of you.
I remember one time in the class, somebody asked, I don't know who it was, if we were doing anything today.
Oh, yeah, that's a
And
good question.
you said that you would have fired them or something.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They always tell the story when I worked for Pike Electric that the owner of the company went out in the field. Well, those guys didn't really know who he was. And one day he come up and asked them what they were working on. They said, we're working on 5 o'clock. He said, 5 o'clock came early for you. Kind of the same thing. We're always going to be doing something. It might just be something you don't want to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. And you see kids that we're not doing anything in that class. Well, yeah, you really are doing something in the class. You're just choosing not to do it.
Yeah.
And we got to work around it, make things fun. Like what I've asked them before, I said, can I motivate you? I think motivation's internal.
Yeah.
I can create an environment of motivation, but I don't know that I can motivate an individual. They have to work at that themselves too.
It's like this year, my classes, most of them are online stuff, and it's just reading and writing.
And that's very motivation
And
driven.
it's the same stuff every single day.
Oh, yeah,
And
and
you
it's
just got to be
tough.
able to just, am I learning that much from it? I don't think so, but I'm learning how to write a lot and just
That's
push
the
through.
point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Online classes are great because it provides opportunity to people that maybe can't get to a campus type setting. I agree with that. But it takes a lot of motivation to do.
To learn,
And I'm not
especially.
sure the majority of high school kids are disciplined enough to do that. I'll do it later, and that kind of thing. And it's tough. It is tough. And when you start doing college classes, they don't tell you to turn stuff in. They say, here's the syllabus. That's when it's due.
Yeah, right.
And that's what gets a lot of kids in trouble their first year. My daughter, I'll brag on her a little bit. She graduated from Carroll County High School. She was in top 10% of her class. That was before they did Golden Cavaliers, and she was embarrassed to death because she had to stand up at graduation. But she was just a good student, and she worked at it, but she didn't have to work overly hard at it. And she got accepted to Bluefield College. She got accepted to Virginia Tech. Decided to go to Whitfield to knock out. She had done a lot of dual enrollment stuff, kind of probably like you guys are doing. And she finished at Whitfield in 3 semesters. And then she went to Tech. And she came home and told me one day, she said, Daddy, if I'd tried to come here straight out of high school, I would have never survived. Just because it's so different. Because they just expect you to show up at class and here's what you're doing, turn it in. And it's a big change from what we do. But she adapted. She wound up doing pretty well, I think.
There's some teachers at the high school that are like that, and I haven't had her yet, but Miss Ogle, I've heard.
Miss Ogle teaches a dual enrollment class.
Yeah,
she does. And she has to meet the standards of the college, and she gives the syllabus, and here's your work, and here's what we're going to do, because it's a college class, and that's what they expect. Mr. Mitchell's classes, he does the same type thing.
Definitely.
Especially in the summer classes too.
Oh, yeah.
If it's online, I mean, that's even more They'll release the whole class, publish it.
The first day.
Yeah, and
Yeah, here's your due date.
Yeah.
These are turned in by this
and that's
day.
pretty much the only contact you have with them the whole, unless you have a question.
Right, and then you have to set up an office visit, office hours type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've taken some online classes, and some of them can be tougher than others, because some of them you look at and think, "What in the world am I doing?
Yeah.
What is this?" And it's hard. It is tough.
I think there's a clear difference between learning from it and just doing it.
I think so too. I think a lot of times you're just doing what they require.
Yeah.
Write this paper, do this experiment, do these things. Biology class online is a tough one because you have to do the biology experiments with it. So sometimes those can be a little tough when it's just you and this thing.
Yeah.
I think math courses would be hard.
Math courses can be hard because they, like I said, they give you that syllabus and expect you just do this work.
Because people were complaining about Miss Goad being too hard and stuff, and how they wish they could take it online. I said, "Oh,
no."
I said, "No." I said, "Listen." I said, "She's
at least she's there to
I
help."
said, she's there to help you." I said, "You don't know."
Well, see, that's what happened to
God.
my daughter when she went to Tech. They do a lot of their classes at the Math Emporium. And she was taking, I think she was taking a calculus class, and there was no instructor like a classical setup. And she has to go to this thing, and she said, "This is the craziest class I've ever tried to take, because they give you all this work that's confusing anyway and expect you to do it." Luckily, my son-in-law, who was her boyfriend at the time, he's an aerospace engineer, so he had been through, I think he took probably every math class at Virginia Tech, and he was there to help her. And I think the calculus part made her decide that she didn't really want to be an accountant.
That's interesting.
That's fair.
My mom's an accountant, and I don't think he's ever had to use calculus.
Well, that's what Sarah kept saying. When would I ever use this?
Yeah.
I see you have kids in high school, obviously, ask, when am I ever going to ever use algebra? I said, well, I don't know. You think you might want to know how much mileage your car gets.
Yeah.
I was talking to a teacher the other day. I'm not going to say who, because what they said is it's interesting. They said a lot of it's not what you learn, it's learning how to learn.
They want you to learn the process.
Learn the process.
They want you to learn how to think things through. Do you need to be the greatest at diagramming a sentence? Probably not.
Yeah.
But do you need to understand how it works? Yeah. And that's what I tell people about the engineering process, is that it's about solving a problem and the order that you solve a problem. And that's kind of the way you look at everything in life. You learn the process. That's like a lot of times when you go for a job after you've finished your degree program, whatever it is, they don't care if you're the greatest whatever most of the time. If you are, that's a bonus. But if you're willing to learn, you're willing to show up on time, and you're willing to act like you want a job, they can train you to be what they want you to be.
Right.
But they want to know that you're able to learn. They'd like to see that you have some evidence, whether a degree or whatever, that you have the ability to learn how to do things. And that's how
makes sense.
I think that's true with most cases.
Yeah. Were you on the straight and narrow in high school yourself?
Well, we won't get into a whole lot of that, but no, I mean, we were just kids. We just did stupid stuff.
Do you see a lot of differences in how that's handled back then than it is today?
Yeah, I do. I see things that happen now that I don't think would have ever flown then.
Yeah.
Especially at home.
Yeah.
Because if I had to go home and tell my mom that I did something that I see happen now, well, they wouldn't have to worry about it at school anymore. They would have taken care of that. It's just different. It's a different time. I mean, the world's just a different place.
Do you think it's necessarily better or worse?
I think it's different.
Different.
Is that a good political answer?
Yeah, it does.
It's just different. Do I think kids are kids? Oh, yeah. I think kids are the same. Are they more worldly probably than we were? Sure, because they have access to all types of information that we didn't have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they probably are not. They're obviously a lot more technology advanced than we were. Because what was the most advanced thing we had? A handheld football game or something, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that for the most part, kids are kids. I know you hear people say, "Well, these kids today do this and they do that." Well, okay. But then if I think about it, oh yeah, well there was a guy in high school that was just like him.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this idea that I like to play with in my head sometimes, that every graduating class has people that fit a role.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of each roles and a different type of role in each class.
And when they move through school, they maintain that role most of the time.
They do. And sometimes
because it's expected of them. Do you think so?
Yeah, I agree.
Because I'm the kid that doesn't know anything in class, so I'm going to stay that kid. You ever see this go on?
Yeah.
Or I'm the class clown, or I'm the smart kid, or whatever. You see these roles that they play. But then it's funny, one of these days you'll graduate and you'll come back to a reunion and you'll see your friends and you're like, you remember this? And you'll see that person again and you'll be quite surprised at how much they've changed.
Yeah.
Some of them stay the same, but for the most part, a lot of them change.
Yeah. Have you seen a difference in the behavior of kids post-COVID and pre-COVID?
Yes. Trying to maintain them, the discipline of keeping them working, I think, is because they got used to doing what they wanted to.
Yeah.
But everybody did. Everybody got used to doing what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough transition, especially when we brought them back. And what did we do when we first came back? The AB day?
AB
Is that how it worked?
And then we went back to virtual for.
Then we went back to
2
virtual
months.
for a little while. The AB days it was tough because you had one group of kids at the first of the week and a different group at the second end of the week. Mm-hmm. Well, you're constantly trying to remember what you did. So it kind of blurred together a lot. But yeah, I think that it definitely changed education.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And I don't think there's a surprise when you see reports on television or wherever that we're trying to get caught up from that, because look at we lost how much time in the learning process.
2 years.
I mean, it's tough. It's just tough, especially for younger kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something that I've really thought about lately. A lot of the teachers at the high school are saying that this year's freshman class is especially all over the place, and I think that's because when COVID hit, they were in sixth grade.
Yeah, they were sixth graders.
Sixth graders, yeah.
In that period of time, middle school's an interesting period.
It's very.
It wasn't nearly my favorite, but it is a big growing up period between 6th and 8th grade.
It is
development,
and
right.
Especially
And I look at it when my children went through Carroll County. They went to Woodlawn for 6th and 7th grade, and then they went to the middle school for 8th and 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And 9th graders, well, my son was the last 9th grade class to graduate or come out of the middle school. Mm-hmm. And they seemed, I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, maturity level, they were a little advanced, I feel like. Yeah. Because they were the top dog.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
And then they got moved to high school where they're the low man again. And I don't know what happened there, but it's just a shift, I think. Mm-hmm. I feel like. And you guys lived it. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Do you see more of a reliance on technology, specifically the smartphone, after COVID too?
Oh, yeah,
More
because
of an attachment
they're used to staying on their phone all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, we all are.
Yeah.
I wasn't real sure how this thing with the phones at school this year was going to go. Mm-hmm. And I've been surprised. No, it may go bad tomorrow. I don't know. But I've been surprised how well it has went.
Yeah.
Because even in class, I've probably had to ask a kid to put theirs up twice maybe since school started, and they were never belligerent about it. They just forgot it, or I'll put that up. So
I was surprised about that too,
because I thought it was going to be a constant fight.
Yeah.
Well, going into the library, I used to people's on their phones.
Oh yeah.
When they're taking those online classes. The first few weeks of school, you go in, everybody was reading books.
Yeah.
I was like,
That's kind of strange.
it was shocking.
Yeah.
Or they were teaching each other how to solve a Rubik's Cube. It was just very...
Bring the book back.
Which I like it. I mean, I really do. And I mean, teachers too. You don't see teachers with their phone out. We keep ours. I put mine over on another part of the desk somewhere.
Yeah, I know teachers who lock theirs in their desk.
And don't look at it. I
Yeah.
put mine, I've got a desk. My desk here, I got another desk, and it's over there on that other desk somewhere, and I don't see it. And you really don't miss it that much.
Yeah, and I've talked to students who are kind of happy that it's happened, even if they feel odd saying it, because they're able to focus better in class and learn
Well, I
material.
think so. I mean, they asked me to do part of the experiment last year about how many notifications does your class get in a class period, and I think mine was 90-ish. And I thought, oh gosh, this is awful. These kids got 90. Well, I think one student had like 50. And I turned my data in, and
That's one of the low
and
ones.
Mr. Holderfield was like 90. I think one had like 400 and some.
Yeah, that was one student had.
That is ridiculous because, well, first of all, who's contacting you that much?
I think they were like some kind of chat room or something.
Yeah, I mean, who?
Chat app.
And I tell the kids, I've met you. I don't know that you're that interesting that I have to talk to you all the time. But yeah, I mean, they're used to that, and especially when they were out on COVID, that's what they did. We had Chromebooks. You can chat on a Chromebook, right? Does that work that way?
Not anymore, but it used
But you
to.
could,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
And they were just used to that.
Yeah.
So everything they did was on the phone.
It's interesting that people prefer to communicate digitally rather than in person.
It's kind of strange. I think I just saw something on television before I left the house. They were talking about AI taking the place of like a relationship with other people.
Yeah.
And one of the commentators said, "Go meet people, talk to people, look people in the eye."
Yeah.
And that kind of thing.
It's strange.
It is. Or you'll have people text each other in the same room.
Yes, that's the one that gets
You
me.
know, you two are sitting right there. How about talking to each
Yeah,
other?
just
Right.
think what they're saying to each other though.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're trying to be discreet about something, then
Yeah.
okay, but just a general conversation, have it in person.
Yeah, just talk to somebody.
Do you think your generation had more social skills? than the current generation?
Probably, and then my mom and dad's generation probably had more than we did. I know we always go back to, well, back in my day, we did it this way. You know, you hear it, and as a kid, you're always like, yeah, okay.
Right.
But we did have to interact. We actually had to call people on a telephone to talk to them.
Right.
And if they were talking to somebody else, the line was busy. You had to try again. You didn't text them or whatever. So that was kind of, or go see somebody.
Yeah. And sending letters, because my parents would send each other letters in the
Okay.
mail, and they still have those letters. And I just thinking, wow, I don't
I think
think
the
I
only
would ever
time we
send
did
somebody-
letters, I think my girlfriend was grounded one time, so we had to write letters because she couldn't use the telephone. So she wrote a lot more than I did, though.
Yeah. and that's funny too. There's a book that came out called Bowling Alone. It says more people are bowling than they ever have before, but there's less bowling clubs.
Right.
than there's ever
They're
been.
just going.
Yeah, they're just going
Yeah.
by themselves.
Yeah.
And that can be fun too, but they said social interactions among people are getting less and less. They say young men are going out on less dates than they ever have before.
Well, that kind of goes along with what I was watching before I came over
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Replaced with AI.
Yeah, and it's we're built for social interaction.
Yeah.
I mean, people are made to be around other people.
There's a
That's
reason.
where you learn. I think I studied in psychology that there's a culture of children. You guys learn how to act from other kids.
Yeah.
You'll see something that they do that gets you in trouble, and you learn what? I'm not going to do that. So yeah, you learn from being around other people, especially in social situations.
My dad says that you're the sum of the 5 people you're around most, and
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
if you're not around people, then who are you?
Yeah, you're the sum of one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're the greatest person you know
Yeah.
most of the time,
Yeah.
right?
I don't have much humility.
I think public school teaches kids a lot.
It does. Well, they have to learn how to interact with other people. You have to learn how to interact with students. You have to learn how to interact with adults. You have to learn how to interact with authority figures in a school. So yeah, it's good. And most kids comply. Most kids move right along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they understand how the game's played. And, well, they all do. Some of them just choose
Not
to be a little more
Yeah.
standoffish, I guess, from that. That's a good word. That's what we use.
Yeah.
And it's neat to see when younger kids are in school, they see the teacher as more of a parental figure.
A parent figure.
parent
I'd
figure.
agree with that.
Yes.
And as a child turns into a young adult, or even an adult, I mean, there's 18-year-olds that go to other school.
Oh, yeah.
They that transitions almost to more of a, not a peer, but an equal. almost.
Right.
So they learn
But
how
see,
to,
when I went to school, you didn't see your teachers as a peer
No.
or an equal. They were somebody that was up here.
but you see them having to interact with them in an adult manner, not
Right.
in a
Yeah.
parent-child
Which is
manner.
good, and that's what we talk about ninth graders. When they come in, you know how they are. But it's interesting to see the transition in them from there to a senior.
Yeah.
I think that's especially prevalent in CTE coursework or
Well, yeah, and it has to be. you know.
electives because I'm in your room because I want to be.
Right.
At least
For the most part.
usually,
yeah,
right?
usually.
But when I'm in math class, well,
And see, that's what happens with my first year classes. It's just a conglomeration of it. It's an exploratory class. This is what we do.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then as we moved into the SolidWorks stuff, or we worked into the laser cutting stuff. So we get more in depth into doing some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. At the middle school, they're teaching 6 and 7. I don't think 6, but 7th graders how to weld,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's wild.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
That's
Because
awesome.
by the time they get to high school, if they want to do welding, they've probably had it
Yeah.
Yeah.
at some level, and they're really good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think somebody told me they were in the top. Their agriculture programs in the top 3 in the nation. I think that's what
Yes.
Miss Jones told me this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's up there, and Miss Leonard, which is Mr. Leonard's wife,
Yeah.
she does the data reporting for the middle school
Yeah.
FFA chapter, and I was talking to Mr. who's part of FFA over at the middle school, and they're really advanced when it comes
Oh
to
yeah, and
the
I
middle
think
school
Doctor,
FFA.
Mr. Carpenter does a lot of good work with
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a good role model for them too, because he's just
Yeah.
even keel guy.
Yeah.
And he's just good with them.
Yes.
And
And he's experienced.
he is very experienced. His brother went to school with me,
Mhm.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
They were all big in the FFA back in high school too.
And the
it's-
high school's big into it too. I mean,
Yeah.
they take trips.
Oh yeah, they went to State
All the
Fair
time.
yesterday. I think we had some really high
Yeah.
people place high yesterday.
Ethan Seacrease,
Yeah.
who's a student of
Yeah,
yours,
I've got him.
did pretty well, I heard.
And
Yeah.
most of them went up to, I think it was Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Last week.
Last week. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's right. Yep.
So,
It's big, and
But they do a great job with them, I think.
Yeah.
I know Alan does well with his forestry judging classes. Dr. Webb does well with his classes. And Sarah Jo does exceptionally well with her classes.
yeah.
And that's the thing that's great about that, because these kids get to see stuff that kids in other schools, I've worked in a variety of school systems, they don't have what we have.
yeah.
Look at my wife's class. They can go in and get a cosmetology license, and
Yeah.
be a licensed professional when they graduate, and go straight and start making money.
The nursing program
nursing
too.
too.
The nursing programs like it. Mr. Leonard's class,
Yeah.
I know he's got several people that have left his class. A couple of them, I think, are doing some of their own
Yeah.
work now.
Yeah.
And building trades, auto mechanics, any of these classes, I'm probably leaving somebody out. Greg Boland's class,
Yeah.
those
Yeah,
guys are
criminal justice.
learning something that they can use to do a career. The STEM lab was a great asset for what we had. Did we do material science when
We
you
did.
were there?
We did.
And Miss
With Miss
Rasko,
Rasko.
she did a great job with that.
Very smart lady.
She does a great job with it. So that was always good, because if you go into this field, engineering field or something, you're going to see this stuff.
Yeah.
I've had several kids come back. A couple of them that are at Virginia Tech now in their engineering program, and they told me that if we hadn't had SolidWorks when we went through your class, we would be behind when we got there, because it's amazing to them how few kids have already had that.
Yeah.
So that's why I think classes like ours, they always put kids in an academic track or this track or whatever. Well, what kids are getting into engineering schools?
What does it take them?
Very academics kids,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's beneficial to them to have classes like ours because they're gaining some practical skill and learning how to solve a problem.
Yeah, and they have a diverse skill set.
Oh yeah, and I tell kids in my class, especially the first years, that I don't care if you go into this or not. At some point in life, you're going to have a problem, and learning how to solve problems. If you don't learn anything but that, that'll be great for you.
Yeah.
And your class telling a lot about working in a group.
Right.
Because by that time in school, you know those people.
Right.
But most of the time, you haven't worked in that situation with those people.
Right.
So just learn how to collaborate.
And how many times I preached to you about pick your partners carefully.
Yeah.
Because I tell them, do not be a social loafer. And you know, you've been in groups with people where it's two people do all the work and one guy does all the talking. Okay. Everybody needs to know their role. Now, do you need a marketing person? Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure.
But you don't need somebody that just is a hanger-oner. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You need somebody that's going to pull their weight too.
Of course, yeah.
And you learn that in groups. Well, I like you, so I'm going to pick your group. Then I find out, wait a minute, he's not doing anything.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I tell them, don't let them ruin your grade.
Yeah. How old were you when you went back to school?
When I went back to school, I don't remember. How old was I? 38, so 30-some.
Do you think you were better suited going back to school at a more mature age than you have?
I think, for me,
As a
absolutely.
non-traditional student.
Yeah, for me, absolutely. Because I had gotten away from it because I was working. I had kids. I was married. I had to do all these things. But then there's always something that just kind of gnaws at you. So I went back and got a management degree first, and then went back and got an educational leadership degree to go with what I already did, because most of what I learned about the engineering field, I learned that in the field and learned that out in life.
Yeah.
I had to go take the practice for tech ed, and everybody must be scared to death of this test. I don't know. And Mr. Leonard and myself, we've talked about it since, and we're like, well, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of stuff on it, but it was all stuff that we learned working, and it all made sense because it was stuff that you've actually had practicality in. Yeah, and that helped. Having to learn how to write papers again was kind of tough. I had to go I went through the CTE licensing program at Virginia Tech when I first started teaching, so learning how to write papers again was kind of tough.
What's the length of those papers usually up there?
Most of the time 4, 5, 6, 7 pages.
Yeah.
A lot of times. I think the last project I had to do in graduate school was about 62 pages, but it was
What was the subject matter?
it was all my work that I had done in the program. So we had to put all that stuff together. Good Lord, it was long.
Looping back to teaching, how do you feel about the grading system in school? Do you feel like it's helpful? Do you feel like
The
it's a
grading
hindrance
system?
when it comes to learning?
Like the 10-point grading system?
Yeah.
No, like students being graded instead of learning, if that makes sense.
Well,
Focusing too much on the grade rather than
I get what you're saying. We've talked about this a lot in classes you'll go to talk about this a lot. If you learn 60% of the material, what's that grade?
60. It's a D now.
It's a D now, but what it used to be.
F.
So you learned 60% of that material, and it was an F.
Yeah.
You learned 69% of it prior to the new scale. You learned almost 3/4 of the material, right? But you were looked at, it was a failure because you learned 70% or 69% of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand we have to have that in place. I understand it.
Right.
But what if 69% was all that student could do?
Right. Yeah.
But it's just the game we play. I mean, that's the way the rules are set up.
Mr. Mitchell talks about that a lot in his class, about how he'll ask students if they're learning for a grade or if they're learning for learning.
Well, and you know as well as I do, you have students that all they want's the A.
Yeah.
Right? Because I need my grade point average to be this, or my mom will be mad if I don't get a A, and that
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
But do you want to earn that A, or do you want somebody to give you that A?
Right. Yeah.
And that's what we run into a lot. You gave me a B. You know, you've heard kids say that before, and I said, well, no, I'll let you earn that B.
Yes.
The joke used to be, especially when I came out of the working world, the joke was that nobody can make an A in Sumner's class. But the reality of it was, no, they really couldn't. Because what was a A?
It was perfect.
A is perfect work. 100's perfect work. And are you giving me professional level work? And that's why I looked at it. But then I had to rein it in a little bit and think, okay, it's okay to hold them to a standard. But these aren't professionally trained people.
Right.
These are students that are learning how to do this. So if they learn X, okay, that could be seen as A work. And I do a lot of mine based off a rubric, 1 through 5.
Right.
That 1 is that you couldn't do it if I did it for you. And 5 being that you could take what you know and help other students, teach other students.
Right.
And that's kind of the way that the grading system's laid out in CTE. We get our stuff from a thing called CTE Resource, and they have a rating system 1 through 5. So I ask the kids every year, I said, who wants a 1? Nobody wants a 1.
Yeah.
Who wants a 5? Everybody wants a 5. And I said, well, if you want a 5, you just failed this class, because 5 means you can't do anything. Because it's backwards, and I don't know why it's set up that way. But a 1 is really good.
Okay.
But I try to bring that into the grading scale.
You talk about students seeking the A out, always seeking the A out. How do you think that translates to when they get out into the workforce?
When they get out into the college world,
even after that.
Even after that. Okay, you go to work and you're doing your work, but you're doing your work like you did it when you were at the high school or wherever. Okay, you may know some about what you do, but they need it to be, because I'm trying to sell this product or whatever to a customer, I need it to be better than, well, that's okay. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I like Mr. Watson, so I'm going to give him an A, right? That kind of thing, whether he may have not deserved it or not. Do you think that happens?
Of course, yeah.
Sometimes that happens, but out in the world that doesn't happen most of the time.
Do you feel like you've gained a better understanding of what you teach by teaching it?
Oh yeah, and actually a fellow that just passed away the other day, Eddie Bunn, he was an engineer in Mount Airy, did civil engineering. He taught at Withville, I think, for a while at the college, and when I first got into teaching, I told him I had taken a teaching job. I remember where we were. We were on the bleachers at Carroll County High School at Relay for Life in 2005. And I told Eddie that, hey, I'm going to go, I've got a teaching job. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you, you'll learn more about your subject teaching than you ever thought you knew before. And that's true, because you're exposed to, in your job, you do that. But if you're teaching, you have to do all these other things. You have to expand what you do and what you know. And it helps you learn your subject.
I found that by trying to teach other people, I learned, because I have to really look within and see if I'm understanding.
Right, because you have to, but then they're going to ask you questions.
And I might not be able to
and
answer
you're like,
that.
oh no, which I go back to something that a structural engineer I used to work with, George Miller, great guy, probably smartest guy I ever knew. He used to tell me, Curt, smartest man in the world doesn't know everything, but he knows where to find it. And I said, well, that's pretty good advice, because I don't know every formula in this math book, but I know how to go find it. I know what I need it to do, and I know how to go find that formula to do that. And that's where learning the process,
It's a lot more important.
you know how to put the components together to make it do what you want it to do or need it to do. Yeah.
I think That's something that math classes are good about. And I'm a bit biased because I like math classes,
Right.
but some people look at it as trying to memorize what to do.
Yeah.
And that doesn't
It's
work.
hard to memorize because there's a zillion things going on here. Yeah.
And you just have to learn the process. You have to learn the steps. You have to be
They
flexible.
teach you the
enough.
FOIL method, or they teach you this method, they teach you that method. Yeah, and then you learn how to put it in to make it smaller. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you start out with this big equation, but you need it to work down to this.
Yeah.
And this might sound like beating a dead horse. I think math, like everything else, gets easier as you do it. I think especially math. It seems like the more you exercise that muscle, it just becomes more natural.
Well, you can look at things and say, oh yeah, that's this.
Yeah.
Because I want to feel, like I said, I went back to what I said a minute ago about algebra. When am I ever going to need it? Well, maybe I want to know how many miles to the gallon my car gets. All right, I want to know X, but I know how much gas I put in it and how far I went. So now I can do the math and find out what X was.
Yeah.
So it's that simple. That's how you use it. It helps you solve a puzzle.
And math works the brain in a really interesting way that most other subjects can't.
Yeah.
And even if you're not going into math, doing math can help you
Well,
in other aspects of life too. Just learn that system of thinking.
Yeah, and that's what I was really trying to get at. It's not necessarily memorizing. Like you might have to memorize something for history class, but you have to think and you have to
you have
to manipulate and conceptualize.
Right. When in like history class, which I love history, I told my wife one time I want to go get a history endorsement, and she was like, "How many more do you need?" But because I think history is interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're learning this information not necessarily to memorize it, but when you learn it, then it's there, and you don't necessarily have to. Not what people think of memorizing. You just became familiar with the material.
Yeah.
Well, me and Ethan both love history, and it pains me when people say they don't, because I don't think they really understand what it's all about. I learned history through hearing stories, documentaries, and people telling stories and stuff. That's what it is. It's just real people doing.
Well, it's just people telling
living their
what
lives.
happened, right?
Yeah.
And
If you like talking to each other, you
I've
like
always
history.
liked history, whether it's local history, learning it from your mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, or learning about your local history. How did Hillsville get its start? Or how did Carroll County do its part?
Yeah.
Or how did Virginia fit into this?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. And when I went through college, we could take world history or U.S. history. So I took U.S. history because I wanted to know more about what went on with us.
Yeah.
Because we learned world history, right? When do we do that?
I
Is
think
that
that's
like ninth
eighth
grade?
and ninth
Eighth and
grade.
ninth
There's
grade?
two parts to it, I think.
And then you get U.S. history in 11th grade, right? But I just think it's interesting. I like to read about history. We were in Charleston last weekend, and my aunt was staying at the Francis Marion Hotel. And I said, Francis Marion Hotel? That's the Swamp Fox. With the Swamp Fox, during the Revolutionary War, Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, led a lot of the guerrilla warfare that went on during the Revolutionary War. And I think I've read that the pattern that Mel Gibson's character in The Patriot was patterned off of the Swamp Fox.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So
Just small stuff like that in history has such a... People look at it and they use it.
Right.
Whether or not they realize it. And it's just interesting. And you wouldn't notice... You wouldn't have known that if you hadn't studied it.
Right.
One time or another.
I think a really passionate history teacher can mean the difference too between.
Oh,
Yes. Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's nothing worse than going and listening to a teacher that
Lectures.
just reads it and it's just monotonous.
Yeah.
And I try not to do that. I want us to be up, moving, doing things, some goofy stories or whatever we do in class. And I think history would be a good one to do that with too, because I know we have to teach. It's a SOL class, I think.
Word history is.
Word
Yeah.
history.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know there's a framework we have set up, but history was just fun. I like.
Well, I mean, I've had some classes where it seems so disconnected from anything. It doesn't even seem like real people, and that's just.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really sad. But
Like one time I took a math class that we had to learn. What was it? We had to use Hindu Arabic, Egyptian numeration, and Chinese numeration. Now that was one I could really say, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to use any of that ever again.
Yeah.
But it was in the curriculum, so we had to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, language is, you don't really realize how important language is in your life
Right.
until you lose it.
Until you need it, right.
Until you need it,
Yeah.
until you need it, right? And I think by using other languages and opening yourself up to that perspective of not being able to communicate,
Right.
that can teach you something in it. I know it's not exactly the same as using different number systems, but I think that maybe it's a similar idea.
Right.
Because you'll see the number 3 and you're like, oh, that's 3, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you see it in some Chinese script, then it's
Right.
like, wait,
But
maybe-
then you have to think about, okay, what is that?
what's really going on, right?
Now, my dad, like I said, he was surveyor, he just retired recently. He started out as a surveyor for the highway department and worked his way up through state level offices. And then his last job, he was the executive director for the National Society for Surveying and Mapping.
Wow.
So he was a political guy mainly.
Yeah.
But he had to speak. He had to go to most states and meet with their conferences, meet with people, speak in front of people. And he said the thing that helped him with a lot of the language, writing, and all these other things that he had to do, he took a Latin class when he was in high school.
Yeah.
And he said that he still, to this day, remembers things he learned in there because it just fit in with other things that he had to do.
Yeah. I do wish that was something that our teachers covered more, like etymology and how different words originate and how they fit together.
Right. And a lot of them do have a basis in Latin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot, especially within the legal and medical field.
In the medical
Yes,
field
right,
especially, right.
Just learning a few core parts of words can expand your vocabulary tenfold.
Well, and after I got out of school and had went to school again, I would have a dictionary and I'd just check through the dictionary, just seeing what things were, how they were spelled, what they meant, different words, and people were like, "What is wrong with you?"
Were you in person during that time?
I was just sitting wherever and had a dictionary at the time.
Were you like in person classes when you went back to school?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them were. We had a cohort that would meet together, so you went through the whole program with the same people.
Yeah. Next time my dad's was.
Yeah, probably it's the same thing. They do that a lot with adult learners too.
Yeah.
So you had a wife and a family at that time too.
Yeah.
Did that make things more complicated, or was that a better support
It was
system?
just different. My wife did tell me after I finished my master's program, I don't want to see you write another paper. And Virginia Tech would send us stuff periodically about their doctoral program. And I was like, I don't think I've got another paper in me. Which now I'd never make my money back, but still. She was good with it though, because our kids were a little older, so it wasn't that we had to tend to them every second then. When I did my master's, I drove to Abington 2 nights a week for 2 years. I worked all day and worked at Red Hill Store and then did that 2 nights a week. So I had a lot to do.
Yeah, no kidding. How did you balance a full working life and a family life with going back to school?
It was tough sometimes. You wind up... There again, my kids were older, so they were already doing their thing.
Did you take a full-time course load, or was it...
What did we do? We had to take at least 14 hours, I think.
Semester?
So we could classify, so we could qualify for full-time student rate.
Wow.
I think that's right, because I mean, it was a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, in the undergraduate program, a lot of it was 6-week classes. So it was bam, bam, bam. And you could get 14 in a semester pretty easily. And then in the, how many was in my master's program? 36, 39 credit hours. So you were taking probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 at a time in a master's program.
Wow,
a lot more writing
Yeah.
in a graduate program.
Yeah, can you talk about the difference between an undergraduate program and a master's program?
Well, undergraduate program, whether you go to Withville Community College for the first year or go to Virginia Tech or wherever, those first 2 years, you're taking a lot of core classes. You're taking your English, your math, your humanities, all these things that they require you to do. But then your last couple of years are more program oriented.
Yeah.
And then in your graduate school, it's just all focused on that thing.
Did you have to write a thesis for your master's?
Not for mine, no. It was non-thesis program.
Is that something you feel like you would have enjoyed doing
I
or
don't
benefited
know.
from?
I mean, once I got into it, I really didn't mind the writing part because I had a lady that was a English teacher that I worked with, and she would check my papers. And she told me one time that you write like you speak. I thought, well, that sounds scary. But she said, no, it's good because you're writing and you're telling a story.
Right.
And that's just the way I did mine. So you do a lot of free writing. I don't know, you've probably done that before, where you're just sitting typing what you're thinking, and then you got to go back and put it all together. And I even got to the point where I would turn on a recorder, like a talk-to-text type thing, and I would just start talking, telling it what I want my paper to be. So it would just write it for me, and then you'd have to go back and read it and say, well, that's terrible. That doesn't make any sense. Or that was a really good idea, or whatever.
Could you get papers written faster that way? Because I forgot how many words a minute people speak on average, and it's much greater than numbers.
A lot of times you're just trying to tie your thoughts together when you're writing, because you got so many things going on.
Because I think that would be really hard to do.
Yeah.
It helps get your idea on paper.
Yeah.
Then you just have to go back and play teacher and mark this out, or well, that would have sounded better if I did this thing. Right. And you just write a lot more papers when you're doing a graduate program a lot of times, I think.
I listened to a podcast episode with Andrew Huberman, and you probably don't know who he is, but he's big into psychology, and he actually did what you did. He would turn on a voice-to-text synthesizer, and he would just talk.
Right.
He says he would walk up and down his yard. He just talk.
Well, that's where your best ideas come from.
Yeah.
Because how many times, like even on the way out here, what's the chances I was thinking, well, I'd probably say this. That's just what we do. Yeah. So some of your best ideas just come to you, but you may not have time to write them down, right? So you have to have some way to get them recorded. Or they disappear. Just like with music or anything else.
Yeah.
Man, that would be really good. So I better write that down, or I'll never remember this thing.
It's like with the podcast too.
Yeah.
Really hearing stories.
Oh yeah.
Try to get them recorded and stuff, and you've seen how many.
Because you remember, oh yeah, he said this, but then you don't remember all of that, and it's good to have it recorded because then it's there.
Yeah, and that was really.
And that's what I say a lot of times, like with you guys, or any younger people, with family history.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Listen to what your grandparents have to say, or your aunts and uncles, because one of these days they'll be gone, and those stories will be gone.
Yeah.
So we have to get that. Get that down.
Was your grandfather in World War II? I think we discussed
both of them
this
were,
before.
yeah. But one of them was in Europe, and then the other one was in Burma.
Yeah.
Or India. He was in the China-Burma-India theater.
Because your grandpa was in Italy. We talked about that because
yeah, he started out in Algiers or Algeria in northern Africa.
Yeah.
And they went through Salerno, Sicily, into Anzio, and then up through Italy, and they were the hammer to the anvil from D-Day.
Yeah. My great-grandpa was Anzio in Italy. I think they were in the 5th
Or they were the anvil to the hammer, right? Yeah. Coming from the north.
But it's cool. I never met them, but you can track where they went in the war. And it makes stuff more personal. It really does.
Oh, yeah. I bought a book on the 3rd Infantry Division that my grandpa was part of. And in the back of it, it had a list of medal winners. So I'm looking through it, and I got into the Bronze Star medal winner section, and my grandpa won a Bronze Star in April of 1945 that I never knew he had. And I'm not sure he ever knew he had it, to tell you the truth, because he was just wanting to go home.
Yeah.
So...
and there's a bunch of service records in Carroll too. I think it said he was my grandpa was a combat engineer.
Okay.
I'm not really sure what they did, but I guess it's like bridges and stuff. And
Yeah, they would be, and probably landmine stuff and
Yeah.
all that kind of thing. My other grandpa was an airplane mechanic in India, which is where, I don't know that he worked on them, but where the Flying Tigers were stationed out of. And they did what was called flying the hump. They flew over the Himalayan mountains. He said it was always pretty scary when you worked on an airplane and then the pilot would say, "Get in." And he would make you go with him.
Yeah.
If you said his plane's ready, get in. And that's where he learned to be meticulous in his work. And he came back and went to work for the highway department. And he worked there for 38 years. He was a resident mechanic for the Hillsville residency for 38 years.
Did he talk about the war?
No, he never talked. He told me the only thing he ever fought was mosquitoes. So he didn't really talk about it. My other grandpa really never talked about it much.
No.
He had what they referred to as shell shock, which is PTSD. So he never talked about it with me because I was just a kid.
Yeah. Is that something that you regret? Do you wish they talked about it more?
Well, you'd like to know that history.
Yeah.
You'd like to know some of it. But then again, there's things he wouldn't want to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
For things he had to see or do.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
There again, history.
Yeah.
It's not pretty sometimes, but it is still history.
It happened. Yeah.
Especially with those World War II guys, because we wanted to interview a World War II veteran. They're hard to find.
Oh yeah, they are now.
There's none left in Carroll County.
Now, when I was a kid, everybody knew somebody that was in World War II because everybody was in World War II for the most part. But yeah, that generation they're leaving.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because they're again get their history because one day that history is going to be gone.
Well, you think about American history, you think about all these wars, and they seem so far away.
Right.
World War II is the biggest war in human history.
Yes.
And it's so close, and that's what's crazy about it.
Yeah.
So you've met people that fought in the worst war ever.
Oh yeah.
So it's interesting to think about that, the historical relevancy of that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And how many people from Carroll County were part of it because everybody was part of it for some way. I don't know if either one of you ever read the book The Bedford Boys. It's about, why the D-Day Memorial is there, right?
It's the highest deaths per
It
capita.
was the highest per capita death rate of anywhere in the United States. Well, my grandma was from Bedford County. And I asked her, because she's the same age as a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
And I said, "Did you know any of these guys?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm sure I did. And I probably knew all of them." Yeah. But she couldn't recall names because she really didn't know the names of them. But that's in Bedford, Virginia.
Yeah.
So that held the highest casualties on D-Day for a place that size. But yeah, history's right here. Civil War, history's right here. My great whatever grandpa, however many generations back, was taken prisoner. He fought at the Battle of Cloyd's Mountain in Pulaski County. And then he was taken prisoner somewhere up middle part of the state.
Well, we figured out my sixth great grandfather, he was shot in the leg at Market Garden.
Yeah.
Up in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
So it's just learning that family history.
Well, this grandpa died as part of a prisoner of war exchange. He got taken prisoner and sent to Indiana, I think. Well, the story's in the Carroll News somewhere. Yeah. My cousin did a story on it, and they were bringing him back as part of a prisoner exchange, and he died somewhere, and nobody really knows where he died. But he's got a marker out Independence Church on Stable Road talking about him.
A lot of people don't know Hillsville was raided by Stoneman.
Oh, yeah.
When he was coming out of, I guess he looped out of West Virginia and went down into North Carolina, and he was coming back up.
Yeah.
They said they marched through Hillsville and took the town that night.
I've seen that story before.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was right here.
I think they occupied it for a night.
I remember one time my son was playing baseball in Powhatan up near Richmond. And we were coming back, and it came a storm that night. And it was in the summer about, when it gets dark, about 9-ish. So we were riding back through there, and after that storm, and we're riding through the Appomattox battlefield.
Yeah.
And all that fog, the sun was kind of out right at dusk, and that fog sitting on that battleground. I told him, I said, this is a kind of eerie thing because that happened right there.
Yeah.
Lee surrendered right there in that building that we're driving by right now. So it ties it all together. You hear these things and they're all so far away, but not really.
No.
They're right there.
Yeah. It just happened.
No, it just happened.
Yeah.
Right here.
You got sun up, sun down so many times and you're right back there.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I agree. But yeah, we need to learn our history. We know what's going on. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Would you in high school ever imagine that you are where you are today?
Absolutely not.
No.
Not even a little. Because I just wouldn't have ever thought that was a career path I would have chose. Like I said, I was working out in Mount Airy. Worked before I went into teaching. I was working for a general contractor.
Mm-hmm.
But I got involved with North Surrey High School. Their drafting teacher called me and asked me if I would be part of their shadowing program. I said, sure, send some over here, we'll do it. And then got me involved in their mentoring program. And then got me involved in doing some things with mock interviews for them and this kind of thing. And I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And then a job came open in Botetourt County, of all places. Mm-hmm. And I applied for it and got it. And I drove to Botetourt, out past Lord Botetourt High School for 3 years. That's a long ways to drive every day.
Yeah.
And then came back and worked at Radford. Mm-hmm. But no, when I was in high school, I would not have. There would have been no chance that I would have done this job, probably.
What did you want to do?
Like I said, I like the civil engineering into things.
Yeah.
I like the design part of things.
Yeah.
So I like doing that.
You mentioned that you tried to go to school out of high school for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you went and worked in a factory, and then you went back.
Yeah.
And you chose drafting when you went back.
Yes.
Did your drafting teacher in high school have a role when it came to choosing drafting?
Just the example he set.
The example, yeah.
I had him as a teacher. Dr. Burnett had him as a teacher. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All these people had this guy as a teacher. And Dr. Burnett used to teach drafting at Carroll County High School years ago. And that's what I always kind of patterned what I did off of, because I saw what he did. And I thought, okay, he went from doing this to this, so my path kind of followed along behind him. So he's kind of set the way for me to follow.
Do you consider yourself a role model?
So that's a tough question. But
I think everybody
when
is.
you're a teacher, you're a role model regardless.
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm at the school or if I'm out in the world.
Yeah.
You're still a teacher to people, because you're going to see me as being Curt Sumner, the teacher at the high school. Yeah. Even if years down the road we know each other and it's a totally different dynamic, you're still seen as that a lot of times. So you got to be careful with that. You got to be careful when you're out in public, because kids and parents are going to see you.
Yeah.
And you just got to be careful, because it's a pretty big responsibility sometimes.
We always ask our interviewees if they had an instructor or mentor that really had an impact on them. I'm going to change it around this time.
Okay.
Have you ever had a student that you felt you've ever had an impact? Or
Yeah.
A student that
had an impact on me?
You?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because you see kids, especially in our area, we're not a very affluent area. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And you see kids that don't have whatever.
Yeah.
And I always tell a story, and I'll tell this one on a kid that I had in class. I won't name any names. One time he was in Wythe County. One day he came to school, and he just was not himself that day, because he was always a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. Mm-hmm. And on this day, he was just a real peel. And finally I said, buddy, let's go out here and we're going to have a discussion about your attitude today. And when we went out, I said, what's the problem? He said, nothing. Nothing's wrong with me. Well, obviously something's wrong with you. What's going on? Nothing. All right, it's just me and you standing here. Tell me what's happening. And then it hit me. I said, have you had anything to eat today? And he told me, no. Well, why not? I don't know. I said, well, obviously you've not had it for some reason. He said, well, I don't know. They keep cutting our power off. My mom and daddy don't have any money to give me. I said, okay. I want you to take this money and I want you to go to that vending machine right there and I want you to get you something to keep you alive till we can figure this out. Mm-hmm. And he told me, that's not right. And I told him, right or wrong's got nothing to do with it at this point. We've got to get you something to eat. And I think that hit me then, how things are. Because you got kids that, I don't get too upset if I see a kid go to sleep in my class sometimes. Sometimes they're just lazy. But other times, who knows what they did. They may have worked till 2 o'clock last night. Who knows? I mean, or maybe they didn't have anything to eat. That's why school breakfast is so important. Right. And you look at things that we don't really think about. Hey, it's a snow day today, right? Well, it may be something that some of these kids are not getting anything to eat today because it's a snow day. So we have to keep those kind of things. So I think that's the impact that students have on you. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people that I don't know that I could have ever taught elementary school because they can't hide it as well as high school kids do. Yeah. Because you know the ones that are in what kind of shape. Yeah. And I think that's the effect that students have on you. Because you care for them. I mean, like I tell them, I've told you this probably. Yeah. When I'm there, I'm your parent. Mm-hmm. And you're my kids when you're in that class. Sometimes I might have to get after you because I'd have to get after my kids. Mm-hmm. But when you're there, my responsibility is to take care of you like I think your parent would. And if I see they don't have something that's hard, it's hard to do. It's hard to you got to figure out how to help them. Yeah. So. Were
your own kids still in school when you started teaching?
Yeah, they were young. They were, let's see, Sam was 8, I think, and Sarah was probably 10 when I started teaching.
How do you think teaching while they were growing up helped you parent?
Try to get them to behave themselves at school, which wasn't a problem, but I knew how. I always told them, don't ever be the kid that nobody wants to be around. And I said, if I don't give you any more advice, don't be that kid. And you know, you've seen them. There's kids you don't want to be around, right? Mm-hmm. And I tell them, don't be that guy. Don't be the one that says, oh, here comes Sam Sumner. I don't want to, don't let him see us. Mm-hmm. Right? You see those kids. Because I saw that in schools, and I didn't want my children to act like that. And I told them they better hope that they never acted like that in class because there's no place for it. So, but yeah, I think it helped me. It opened your eyes to what goes on in a school.
Yeah, it'd have to give you a better understanding of what the kids were.
Parents will say sometimes, well, they don't do this at school, they don't do that. And I probably did the same thing before I was in there. But then the dynamic just... Is any school day exactly the same? Not really. I mean, you may do the same things, but there's always something that can mess it up pretty fast, right? Yeah. Or make it better. But a lot of times they're not the same all the time. And you just have to be able to, because you have people tell you, well, if I was there, my classes would do this. Okay. I tell people that you always got to remember, you can't be afraid to punt. Because sometimes you might lay out the best lesson in the world and it's awful. And you got to back up and say, okay, that thing didn't work. Let's do this. So you constantly have to do that kind of thing. So that helped. And you saw how your kids, how you wanted your kids to be at school instead of this way. You learn a lot of that.
How do you recover from a lesson that maybe doesn't go so well?
Well, you have to evaluate it and look at it and think, good Lord, that thing was horrible. What happened? What did we do here? So that's why I try to change my stuff up a lot. There's some things that we have to do.
Yeah.
We have to build bridges. We have to build catapults. We have to do these things. But I like to try to mix things up because, truthfully, I get tired of teaching the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
So I have to pull up stuff that's different. And sometimes that didn't really work.
Yeah.
Let's try a different way, or try a different.
Yeah.
Let's skin that cat a different way somehow.
And that's what would have to be so hard, especially like Miss Coates' class. Doing
It is what it is.
You can't really.
No, it just is what it
You
is.
have to do it that way.
Or Miss Ogle's class. It is what it is.
I think that's especially hard with English because you're going to read the same story 3 times a year.
Yes, over and over and
Over and
over.
over.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, sometimes 3 times a day.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
they got
true.
the same
That's
classes.
true.
They're doing it.
Yeah.
See, and with
Over
me,
and
I only have to do it 2 times a day right now because I've
Yeah.
got 2 first-year classes.
Right.
It's better, I think, and when you have first, second, third-year class, it's in a semester, so you're not doing the same thing over and over all day.
Yeah.
Right now, we're building water bottle rockets and studying material science.
Yeah.
In my second year right now, and some kid one day made the comment. I heard him talking with his buddies about something about being an academic class, but that's not what this is.
I heard about that.
And
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, son, what a mistake." So we're talking about material science today. We talked about the periodic table. I said, "That looks a lot like science, doesn't it?" Yes. Because everything's made out of what? Elements of some type, right?
I remember last semester somebody said something like that. And you put like a big stack of notebooks or something.
Oh
on the
yeah, I
desk and
said
walk through.
we can write all we want to about how this is academic, and
Yeah.
I can grade your penmanship, I can grade your English, I can grade your punctuation.
Well, somebody said something. You gave us that engineering test because they said like they knew it already or
Oh
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And everybody like bombed it.
Yeah. Well, that's just what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
because you didn't know it
No.
yet, and that's the thing. I told this story today, and then I'll quit talking. Years ago, I had a young man said, "Mr. Sumner, when I get done with my work, can I work on my English paper?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure." I said, "You need any help?" And he said, "Well, tell you the truth, no offense, but this is an English paper." And I said, "Really? How are you doing it? What's your layout?" And he said, "Huh?" I said, "You gotta have a title page." I said, "You gotta have a header. You gotta have numbers on your paper. Well, how do you gotta do this? What's going on? You gotta write an introduction. You gotta have your however many paragraph body. You gotta have a summary or a conclusion. What kind of citation are you doing? Doing MLA, APA? What are you doing?" And he's like, I said, "You know, this isn't my first time. I had to go to college.
Yeah.
I know how to write a paper." So that was always kind of funny.
Yeah.
What role do you think CTE courses or CTE classes play in a high school education?
I think everybody ought to have to take some because in my opinion, I know you want to make a well-rounded student, but it does. I mean, it gives you that skill set, and I don't care if you take my class, cosmetology, auto mechanics, whatever, on what we get from the state, the first 30 or so competencies that we have to meet are going to be the same for every class. It's workplace readiness skills, getting you ready to go to do things. It's work-based learning type things. It's hands-on stuff. All of these are exactly the same. And I think that helps you in every aspect of life. It's not if you're going to be an engineer or you're going to be a cosmetologist or you're going to work for a contractor. That set of skills is important no matter what. And I think kids that don't take a CTE class miss out on that. And they don't realize it till later, because one of these days you'll have people that you went to school with that you'll talk to and they'll say, "Man, I wish I had learned how to weld when I was there." Or "I wish I'd have learned how to do this when I was there." But you got people out here in the community, in the world, "Well, I didn't know y'all did that at Carroll County High School," because they just don't know what we do. That's why we make a big push, and Carroll County does a great job with their CTE program, trying to get that out there to let people know. Like the cups we do and the laser cutter, people when they find that out, oh man, they're stoked about this thing, because they think those kids are learning something that we could go. If I took you to Thomas Automation right now, they've got the bigger version of our laser cutter. If I took you over there right now, they've got 3D printing, they've got engineers, they've got all this stuff going on there that we could learn at Carroll County High School. So it's, I think every student ought to have some CTE, something. Absolutely. Just because I think it helps them learn problem solving skills. It helps them learn. They see how, okay, in that engineering class, that drafting class or whatever, I see how that geometry works now. Because that used to be the joke I used to tell my kids all the time. I'll teach you geometry you can actually use. But it's the truth. They can see how it goes together. They can learn how to figure the area of something. And it helps because they've got a visual. Now, I could give you the numbers to run the area of this whatever, but if I could actually construct it, now I can actually see how that works.
And I think sometimes that fosters a lack of interest too, when they don't know really like the set in stone concepts of it. It's like this nebulous.
Right.
They don't really know how it applies to anything. I think once they learn,
they see how it works.
Yeah.
And they would come to me because I was, like I said, I used to look at the dictionary, and they would come tell me, Mr. Sumner, we need a vocabulary word. Turn one in for English. Okay. And I'd come up with whatever. My favorite one was always to tell them, well, it would behoove you to advance your vocabulary as well. And they're like, huh? I said, now, behoove is not what's on the end of a bee's leg. It would mean it would be advantageous or to be your benefit. So that was always a funny one to do to them. Or they like that quiz me. What's this word mean, Sumner? And I'd say, that means whatever. That was always kind of funny.
English teacher and engineering teacher.
That was kind of funny.
But as we're wrapping up here,
all right,
we always have a series of questions we ask our interviewees.
Okay.
I'll go first. I think you'll have a pretty interesting perspective on this question. What is your advice, not to really a student, but to a young adult that's trying to make their way in the world and they're just starting out?
Look for something that interests you, because you hear it all the time. If you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. My wife loves what she does. Now the teaching part of it is a day-by-day basis sometimes, just because sometimes of what it is, but she loves that thing, whatever it is. But if you like what you do, if you love to do engineering, do an engineering job. If you love to present, do a marketing job. See, a lot of times we don't think of the business classes as being CTE classes, but they are. They are, and that's the thing. My daughter won some award in Miss Taylor's class. So they went somewhere and she got, I forget what place she got in marketing. And at the time, she's like, marketing? What in the world? I just did it because they asked me to. And now she got a degree in marketing and management, and she got her MBA. So something she liked to do. So that'd be my advice. Follow something that you like. You may wind up following something you didn't really know you like. And then the more you get into it, you're like, why wasn't I doing this before?
Well, I heard somebody ask somebody, and I forget who it was. They said, what do you want to do? It was an older person. And they said, I'll figure it out before I retire.
Right. I'd agree with that. Let's see, I don't know. I still know what I want to be when I grow up. I told my wife one time if I could drive a tractor all day, that'd be okay. That'd be my dream job, to play music somewhere and drive a tractor all day. But not a lot of jobs that do that, so I guess I better find something else.
And we haven't talked about that. You're a big fan of music.
I am.
What's your favorite bands?
My favorite bands? Well, it changes day to day.
What's some bands you've always enjoyed?
Well, we always like rock music. We like Van Halen and those types of bands. I always think it's funny because how many kids at school do you see with a Metallica t-shirt
Yeah,
on
yeah.
all the time. They don't even know who they are. But I say, I saw Metallica open for Van Halen one time. And that was a long time ago. But I like all kinds of music. I like country music. I like that. Love the Eagles and that type of music. But I grew up, my grandma could play any instrument. And her personality was like Dolly Parton. She was just that bubbly person. Yeah. And so we get a lot of that from her. And my son, he got it from me. And my daughter, she's a technical player. She has to have everything right in front of her. My son, he's just gets out there and does whatever. It's just second nature to him.
Yeah.
So.
For other questions, I have two. I usually have one that we ask every interview, but I have a kind of a different one this time.
Okay.
What advice do you have to students or younger adults, maybe even professionals who have an established career that want to be engineers or they want to be draftsmen?
Okay.
What advice do you have to them?
Well, I had a young man one time told me he wanted to be a civil engineer, and I said, okay, cool. That's an awesome field because of how broad it can be. Yeah. I said, how's your math grades? He said, I hate math. I said, well, buddy, life's going to be hard on you as an engineer. Know what you're getting into. Do some research. Find out what it is. How many kids do you know at school right now that want to be a veterinarian?
Probably a lot.
A lot. Or a doctor.
Or a doctor,
yeah.
But they hate science. They hate biology. They hate this and that. Okay, you need to do some research on what that is before you get in it. And I even say this with teachers. You ever had a student teacher in a class that you've been in? They've brought a student teacher in. They normally don't do that until their last year of school to let them do their student teaching. And then they find out I've went through 4 years of this and I hate this.
Yeah.
I think they need to do that up front and let you get a taste of this before you decide this is what I want to do forever.
Some colleges and universities, I think Harvard does it, they'll republish their lectures on YouTube.
Yeah.
And
MIT does it too.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can watch something like, this is
not for me.
That's
I've got a series now. I bought it this year. It's called Everyday Engineering. Yeah. And the professor that does it, because I got the worksheets and everything that go along with it, and it's a video series, but the professor that does it, the professor at West Point.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So he's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
And these kids get to see this stuff. And I think best advice I can give anybody is kind of get an idea. You don't need to know everything about it, but get an idea what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Find out, that takes a lot of math. Or find out do I really want to have to write that many papers? And that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that would be that's a benefit to you because it goes right along with what I told him. Find something you like.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a job that you hate, there's not much more. There's nothing more miserable, I don't think, than having to go to work if something you hate.
Yeah,
I think just talking to people too. Get out and talk to those people that have that job. I mean,
go ask them, shadow, do a mentorship, do a shadowing thing. Cool. Because you go see what they do. Because I'd have kids come when I worked in the engineering department at Pike Electric. They'd come over and they'd hang out with us and see what we did. We obviously couldn't take them in the field because of the liability, I'm sure, but they could still see some of the stuff we did, and it was good for them to get a chance to see that.
Our last question.
Is it's a bit of a doozy.
Yeah.
And we ask every interviewee this question.
Okay.
What is the meaning of life to you personally?
What is the meaning of life to me? Just being happy. Whatever it is. I mean, do something you want to do, and I think that makes your life worthwhile if it's something you like.
Yeah.
See how fast I had that answer? But I believe that. I mean, nothing's more miserable than a life doing something you just drudgery, something that you just have to drag on and do. Find out what you like. Find out what you can do to help other people. Because I think that's what we're geared to do. Because again, we're social animals, right?
Yes.
And that's, I think, a big thing for us we find purpose in helping other people.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask me a tough one besides what's the meaning of life.
That usually stumps one. That usually stumps people.
It does some people, but we've
I
always
just
got pretty good
blurt
answers.
something out. I just blurt something out on that.
It's
I think that's
meaningful.
good.
Yeah.
Be happy. Well, Mr. Sumner, it's been an honor to have
Yes,
you on this
sir. I
evening.
appreciate y'all doing it. It's sorry it took so long to get it. Just schedule-wise, things don't work out.
We
But,
understand.
It's all right.
but
Thank
yeah, I like your little setup here. This is pretty cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope y'all be successful at it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys.